At 34, Elena Carter freezes when Nora Alvarez calls and says Margaret Carter is facing surgery and asking for her. Nora Alvarez speaks softly, explaining that Margaret Carter is stable for now. But at 84, every procedure carries risk. I close my office door and listen as Nora Alvarez says, Margaret Carter still cries my name on some of her hardest nights. 2 years have passed since I last saw Margaret Carter, and every mile between us was built by Victor Carter and his conditions. I remember sneaking into the facility once, holding Margaret Carter's hand for 40 minutes before Victor Carter shut that door too. After that visit, the front desk was told Elena Carter was not approved, as if love could be managed with a clipboard. Then Nora Alvarez lowers her voice and says Victor Carter will allow a visit only if I attend Sophie Carter's wedding first. Of course, Victor Carter made even a grandmother's bedside into leverage, because every kindness in his world comes chained. Nora Alvarez adds one more warning. They are planning something about me at the reception, and Margaret Carter wants me ready. I stare at my award on the wall and think about how 5 years of silence ended with a nurse, not my family, calling me. To explain what happened next, I have to go back 16 years, to a kitchen table and a father choosing land over his daughter. At 18, I sat across from Victor Carter in Millbrook, Virginia, where everyone knew his money and trusted his version. Victor Carter slid a land transfer form across the table and told me to sign away the parcel Margaret Carter gave me. Those 2 acres had rolling grass, a creek, and 1 old oak tree, and Margaret Carter said they were mine, no matter what. Victor Carter called it part of the Oakdale Project and ordered me to hand it back, as if gifts could be revoked by ego. I looked to Helena Carter, but she only flipped through a home magazine, letting silence do the cruel work for her. I did not sign, and 3 days later, Victor Carter canceled the college fund he had promised me since birth. I learned it from a registrar's letter, not from my parents, because humiliation always arrived formally in that house. 1 week later, Victor Carter stood in the foyer and told me that if I walked out, I could never come back. 11-year-old Sophie Carter watched from the stairs and said nothing while my world was cut in half below her. I left with 1 duffel bag, $43, and the sudden knowledge that blood can turn stranger faster than weather. That same night, Victor Carter told neighbors I had dropped out, run off with a boy, and broken my mother's heart. None of it was true, but in Millbrook, Victor Carter's voice carried more weight than whatever truth I could afford. For 2 weeks, I slept in my car and woke before dawn so nobody would see where Elena Carter spent the night. I worked a gas station counter outside Charlottesville, smiling at strangers while learning how hunger sharpens every sound. At 19, I earned my GED while waitressing double shifts in a diner that smelled like bleach and bacon grease. I counted tips, skipped meals, and filled out college forms at sticky tables long after the coffee machines cooled. Community college came first, then transfer papers, then a need-based scholarship to Virginia Commonwealth University. I studied until my eyes blurred, because success was the only language my family never expected me to learn. At 23, Elena Carter graduated alone, cap straight, diploma in hand, while no family chair held my name. I shook the dean's hand, smiled for a photo nobody else wanted, and went home to eat takeout on the floor. At 24, I married Adrian Blake, a man from Victor Carter's network who looked safe from a distance. In public, Adrian Blake was charming, polished, and thoughtful. In private, he managed my money and filtered my calls. He told me which friends were acceptable, which opinions were dramatic, and which parts of myself were too inconvenient. Living with Adrian Blake felt like renting a quieter version of Victor Carter, with nicer suits and softer threats. I escaped that marriage at 27, and I count that exit as survival, not failure, no matter what they called it. At 28, a doctor told Elena Carter she could not have children, and the waiting room heard me break alone. Fluorescent lights buzzed above me, while a 2-year-old magazine sat open beside grief nobody came to witness. Somehow, Sophie Carter learned about my diagnosis because Adrian Blake kept feeding my family pieces of my life. He liked leverage, and my family loved ammunition, so private pain traveled back to Millbrook without asking me first. Now at 34, Elena Carter is a senior architect in Richmond, restoring courthouses, libraries, and old theaters. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already chosen a story where I was ruined, needy, and easy to dismiss. In town, nobody knows the real shape of my life, only the wreckage Victor Carter advertised years ago. Through my glass office wall, I see Julian Brooks at his desk, calm as ever, running simulations with headphones on. Julian Brooks is 36, former Army IT, impossible to rattle, and closer to family than anyone sharing my blood. I call Nora Alvarez back and ask how bad the surgery risk is, because facts feel safer than helpless waiting. Nora Alvarez says bone density, age, and recovery make everything uncertain, even for someone as stubborn as Margaret Carter. Then she tells me Margaret Carter keeps my letters hidden under her pillow. Like love must be smuggled in secret. That image destroys me more than any insult ever could. My grandmother hiding proof that she still chose me. I realize my choice is simple and brutal. Go to the wedding and suffer, or stay safe and maybe lose Margaret Carter. I knock on the glass and tell Julian Brooks I need a favor, and he listens without interrupting once. I explain the wedding, the nursing home ultimatum, the warning from Nora Alvarez, and how traps always wear ribbons in my family. Julian Brooks leans back and says if I go with a plan, not hope, because hope never helped me there. I tell him Margaret Carter is 84 and might not survive surgery, and that is reason enough to walk in. He does not argue, because Julian Brooks knows when support means strategy instead of comfort. That night, I book a hotel in Millbrook and pull out the navy dress I bought for myself, not for my mother. It is well cut, strong, professional, and exactly the kind of dress Elena Carter would want hidden in a closet. Julian Brooks said, go with a plan, so I begin making one, and feel strangely grateful they still underestimate me. 3 weeks before the wedding, Victor Carter demands a family dinner before clearing my name at the nursing home desk. I drive 2 hours to Millbrook and watch the old house appear exactly as memory preserved it. Trim hedges hiding rot, white columns, manicured lawn, and an American flag by the door still perform respectability better than anyone inside. Nobody hugs me when I enter. Elena Carter only looks me over and asks if I am eating enough lately. I am not thin, just healthy and trained by running. But Elena Carter has always wrapped cruelty in concern. At the head of the table, Victor Carter asks what I do now, already preparing to belittle the answer. I say I work at a design firm, and he assumes I answer phones because he cannot imagine I built myself anything larger. I keep eating because correcting Victor Carter in that house has never changed the ending. Sophie Carter arrives late in perfume and self-importance, flashing a ring bright enough to silence the room for her. She pulls me into the hallway and says I need something understated because the Whitmores are very particular people. Then Sophie Carter tilts her head and asks if I am still alone, letting the question do the cutting for her. I say nothing, and she smiles like she has confirmed a theory she has always enjoyed. Before I leave, Elena Carter hands me a garment bag with a pale beige dress hiding inside like surrender. The dress is shapeless, too large, and designed to erase me politely, which is my mother's favorite aesthetic. At the door, Victor Carter puts a hand on my shoulder and warns me not to embarrass them before the Whitmores. He says one wrong move could kill his deal, proving again that business has always ranked above daughter in his ledger. I drive toward the highway when the name Whitmore lands hard, because I know it from somewhere important. Back in Richmond, I open the client database and find the Whitmore Heritage Foundation waiting on my own project list. The foundation funds the restoration of Millbrook's old textile mill into a community arts center I have led for 6 months. The client contact is Catherine Whitmore, mother of Ethan Whitmore, the groom my sister is desperate to impress. Catherine Whitmore knows my design philosophy, my progress reports, and my judgment, but she has never seen my face. I do not plan to use that connection, yet I store it away because self-protection is not the same as manipulation. That evening, Julian Brooks researches the reception venue and finds the local AV company short-staffed for the wedding. He says they need a freelance technician, and before I can object, Julian Brooks has already applied. I tell Julian Brooks he does not have to do this, but he says I am walking into a room already armed against me. He only wants me to have access to the safety switch, which is the most comforting phrase anyone has said all week. By Wednesday, Julian Brooks is confirmed on the reception crew with direct access to the projector and soundboard. I build a short presentation, not an attack, just my life reduced to facts too clean to argue with. The first slide shows graduation, because no one came, and I still cross that stage with my spine intact. The second slide shows my architecture license, framed proof that the dropout story never belonged to Elena Carter. The third shows me on a job site with blueprints and a hard hat, Exactly where Victor Carter said I would never stand. The fourth holds the award naming Elena Carter an emerging architect, earned without a single family cheer. The fifth is plain text. You called me a dropout, broke, and a failure. The truth answers each lie directly. Julian Brooks studies the deck and nods, because clean facts cut deeper than any dramatic speech ever could. He asks whether I want to add the Oakdale land issue, but I say no, because I will not become Victor Carter. I refuse to turn private information into a weapon, even when the target has spent years doing that to me. Then Julian Brooks asks what the trigger is, and I show him one pre-typed word sitting in my phone. If I text begin, Julian Brooks will switch the projector from Sophie Carter's slideshow to mine in 3 seconds. He tests the system during setup, making sure the swap is smooth enough to look like inevitability. He asks what happens if their slideshow turns out harmless, and I tell him then nothing happens at all. I need them to have one last chance to be decent, because when this ends, I need certainty, not guilt. 1 week before the wedding, Victor Carter clears my name at the nursing home desk for 30 supervised minutes. Elena Carter accompanies me to Shenandoah Hills and plants herself in the hallway, texting instead of entering. Margaret Carter is smaller than memory, with thinner white hair and shaking hands, but her eyes are unchanged. The second I sit, Margaret Carter grabs my hand and studies my face, like proof she never stopped believing. She tells me I look strong, and hearing that from her repairs something my parents kept trying to break. Then Margaret Carter reaches under her pillow and pulls out an envelope Nora Alvarez helped her hide. Inside is a photocopy of the deed showing the 2-acre parcel still belongs to Elena Carter, clear as day. For 16 years, I assumed Victor Carter had forged a path around my refusal, but he never got the land. Margaret Carter whispers that he tells people it belongs to his company, yet he never had the legal right. A clipped call from Elena Carter ends the visit, but I leave carrying more than proof. I leave carrying blessing. Outside, I realize Victor Carter lied about more than me. He built business plans on land he did not own. 6 days before the wedding, Julian Brooks sits on my couch as we review the full presentation one more time. Each slide feels calmer than I do, but that is the point. Truth should not need dramatic lighting to hit. Julian Brooks asks whether I am sure, and I answer with the kind of quiet that only comes after enough pain. We drive back from Millbrook, and he says they will not keep it harmless. I say they still get one chance. 5 days before the wedding, Victor Carter calls without greeting and starts listing rules like courtroom orders. I must sit at table 14 in the back corner, speak only when invited, and say I work reception if asked. He specifically bans any mention of my divorce, condition, or personal life, because truth threatens him more than scandal. When I ask if I can see Margaret Carter after the wedding, Victor Carter says it depends on my behavior. The line goes dead, and I feel how easily some fathers speak to daughters like they are unpaid staff. That evening, my phone lights up as Sophie Carter adds me to a family group chat meant to parade cruelty. The first message is a preview of the reception slideshow, and I watch my own face load beneath their smirks. Old photos of Elena Carter appear stretched, filtered, and plastered with childish stickers meant to invite laughter. Then the labels arrive one per slide: dropout, divorced, broke, alone, infertile. Bold enough to bruise from a screen. Sophie Carter types that it will be hilarious and tells me it is all in good fun, which says everything. Elena Carter only replies, "Keep it tasteful, never saying take it down, because complicity can wear lipstick too." Victor Carter says nothing at all, and silence from him has always been approval dressed as distance. I screenshot every message and send them to Julian Brooks, then open my own presentation without replying. 5 factual slides are already there, but I add one final black screen carrying a sentence sharper than accusation. The quote reads that a family is measured not by how it celebrates its best, but by how it treats its vulnerable. I stare at the word infertile for a long time, then close the chat because some things do not deserve response. The wedding day arrives beneath a clear October sky, too beautiful for the ugliness waiting under white church walls. Millbrook Community Church gleams in sunlight while BMWs and Land Rovers fill the lot for the season's social event. I wear my navy dress, not the beige surrender Elena Carter chose, and leave that insult hanging in the hotel. Inside, 200 guests fill the pews: business owners, country club regulars, council members, and the Whitmores. Catherine Whitmore sits in a deep green jacket, silver hair pinned back, posture calm enough to command a room. No one greets Elena Carter. I slide into the last row while Victor Carter works the aisle like a politician. He shakes hands, claps shoulders, and tells people he is proud of his little girl, though everyone knows he means Sophie Carter. Near the altar, Helena Carter laughs to a friend that both daughters are here today, even the difficult one. I notice an older woman 2 rows ahead glance back once, but at that moment she is only another guest to me. The ceremony begins, and Ethan Whitmore looks genuinely happy, unaware how much rot has been polished for this day. Ethan Whitmore speaks his vows with feeling, while Sophie Carter stretches hers longer, brighter, and more about herself. Across the church, I spot Julian Brooks in a black AV polo near the side entrance, adjusting cables like cover. Our eyes meet for half a second, and his tiny nod says everything. I am here, and the backup plan still breathes. At the reception, Millbrook Country Club glows with crystal chandeliers, white linen, money, and a screen taller than Mercy. Table 14 waits in the back corner by the kitchen door, where every server blast reminds me exactly where I rank. My table mates are distant cousins and strangers who speak more warmly to cruise stories than to anything about me. One woman asks what I do, and when I say architect, she nods politely before returning to kitchen renovations. Sophie Carter lifts a microphone for the first toast and thanks parents, planners, flowers, and the Whitmore family. Then she looks to the back and says her sister Elena Carter managed to show up today, which earns nervous laughter. At the head table, Victor Carter clinks glasses with William Whitmore, already leaning toward numbers and promises. Beside them, Catherine Whitmore holds her wine untouched, polite but uncommitted, like she is still reading the room. Helena Carter slips to my side and whispers not to drink, not to talk about myself, and above all to smile. I do smile, not because she ordered it, but because I know exactly what is loaded onto that projector. Sitting at table 14, I ask the audience whether they have ever been placed in the back by people meant to love them, not excluded by accident, but trained to accept it as normal, the way some families make cruelty sound like etiquette. I tell them to stay with me, because what happens next in that reception hall is why I am telling this story at all. The lights dim, and Sophie Carter's maid of honor beams like she has rehearsed the humiliation for days. She announces a special presentation from the Carter family, and soft piano music begins beneath smiling childhood photos. Baby pictures of Sophie Carter fill the screen. Gap-toothed grins, ballet recitals, birthdays, fishing trips with Victor Carter, then come family vacations with Helena Carter in a sun hat and Victor Carter beaming beside the ocean. I am not in a single photo, and absence can make more noise than insult when projected that large. Next come engagement photos of Sophie Carter and Ethan Whitmore, each one earning soft applause from the room. The music shifts playful, almost mischievous, and the screen announces it is time to meet the rest of the family. From the head table, Sophie Carter catches my eye and wiggles her fingers in a little wave like cruelty can flirt. Helena Carter leans back with the satisfied look of someone waiting for dessert instead of public humiliation. My stomach drops, not because I am surprised, but because certainty is colder than fear when it finally arrives. Under the table, my phone is already open. The message to Julian Brooks, prepared with one word only, begin. I promise myself I will press send only if they cross the line they were warned not to cross. The first ugly slide appears with an old photo of Elena Carter, warped to look ridiculous for strangers' amusement. Another slide follows, then another, and the labels keep coming. Dropout, divorced, broke, alone, each one crafted to sting. Some guests laugh, some look away, and others stare at their plates like cowardice is a social skill they practiced. Sophie Carter beams at the head table, because this, not the vows, is her favorite part of the whole wedding day. Helena Carter raises her glass in a tiny salute to the cruelty she helped refine behind closed doors for years. Victor Carter has already turned back to William Whitmore, talking business as if my life is a cocktail joke. Then the final insult fills the screen in giant letters, infertile, and the room narrows to one exposed wound. My medical grief, my private diagnosis, my body itself has been turned into a punchline for 200 strangers. That is the line. And they do not simply cross it. They broadcast it 10 feet high with piano music beneath it. I think of Margaret Carter's shaking hands and her warning not to let them break me again, and I choose otherwise. My thumb presses send, and the word begin travels to Julian Brooks like a quiet match finding dry ground. 3 seconds pass, the slideshow freezes, and the screen cuts to black while Sophie Carter blinks in confusion. She waves toward the back and calls it a tech issue, still confident the room belongs to her script. Behind the booth, Julian Brooks swaps her USB for mine with the steady hands of someone prepared for chaos. The screen returns with clean white text on black. The real Elena Carter, and the entire room falls silent. Victor Carter jumps to his feet and orders it turned off, but Julian Brooks has already locked the system down. The only way to kill the screen now is the utility closet, and Julian Brooks locked that 20 minutes earlier. For the first time in 16 years, Victor Carter cannot silence me by volume, money, or positioning. Slide 1 shows Elena Carter alone at graduation with the caption, "No one came, but I went anyway." Murmurs ripple across table 3, and one woman covers her mouth as the room starts revising everything it believed. Slide 2 fills the wall with my architecture license, framed proof that the dropout story was always a manufactured lie. The murmurs grow louder because credentials are harder to laugh at than an edited family legend. Slide 3 shows Elena Carter on a work site in hard hat and boots, blueprints under one arm, building real things. Guests begin turning into their chairs to look from the screen to me, comparing myth to evidence in real time. Slide 4 reveals my award as an emerging architect, and Catherine Whitmore's hand freezes halfway to her glass. The final content slide answers every insult directly: degree, home, profession, and life built without their blessing. I stand from table 14 without taking a stage, because the point is truth, not performance, finally occupying space. From beside the kitchen door, I watch Victor Carter's face shift into a color somewhere between rage and fear. Sophie Carter shouts to turn it off because it is her wedding, as if marriage grants ownership over truth itself. Helena Carter sits frozen with her glass suspended. Drained of color now, that image can no longer protect her. Then my final quote appears, reminding everyone that families are measured by how they treat their vulnerable members. I do not speak yet, because the screen is saying everything Elena Carter was denied for 16 long years. Victor Carter moves quickly from behind the head table, smile fixed in place like one of his town hall masks. He apologizes to the crowd and jokes that his older daughter has always had a flair for drama, but the room stays cold. He reaches table 14, lowers his voice, and threatens that I will never see Margaret Carter again if I do not sit. I look at him, 62, builder of houses, destroyer of daughters, and say that leash ends tonight. His jaw tightens as he threatens security, but a chair suddenly scrapes back from the head table. Ethan Whitmore stands, face tense, and tells Victor Carter to wait because he wants to hear me speak. Sophie Carter grabs Ethan Whitmore's arm, but he pulls free and says something is not right here tonight. The room shifts the instant Ethan Whitmore breaks ranks, because crowds trust power when it stops protecting itself. Helena Carter rises and pleads that I am humiliating myself, still confusing obedience with dignity after all these years. I look at my mother, remember the dress, the magazines, the silence, and tell her not this time. At the front, Catherine Whitmore has not moved, but her eyes lock onto Mercer and Hollis glowing behind me. I step into the center between the round tables and the candles and stand where all 200 faces can see me. The piano has stopped, the champagne is flat, and my voice comes out steady, almost conversational when I begin. I say I did not drop out. Victor Carter pulled my tuition at 17 because I refused to sign over land. I say I did not choose loneliness. I was told to leave home forever with $43 and a duffel bag. Helena Carter's hand trembles on her glass while I keep going, because stopping has helped them enough already. I explain that my marriage to Adrian Blake was controlling, and leaving him was survival, not failure. A woman at table 5 lifts her napkin to her face while her husband puts an arm around her shoulders. Then I look directly at Sophie Carter and say, infertility is a medical condition, not a wedding punchline. I remind the room that Sophie Carter chose to project that diagnosis for 200 guests at her own reception. Her lower lip quivers, but no defense forms, because truth sounds different when witnesses outnumber enablers. I turn to Helena Carter and say she helped build those slides and gave me a dress meant to erase me. Then I face Victor Carter and repeat his rules. Back corner, stay quiet, do not embarrass us, and let silence answer. I tell him the only embarrassment in that room is what he and Helena Carter just did to their own daughter. The silence becomes absolute. Even a server at the kitchen door stops with dessert trays frozen in his hands. Then Catherine Whitmore rises slowly and walks toward me with the kind of authority rooms instinctively obey. She stops 3 feet away, glances from my face to the screen, and says I am the architect on her project. I answer yes, ma'am, and Catherine Whitmore turns with surgical calm to face Victor Carter before everyone. She tells him the woman he just humiliated is the architect restoring the most important building in town. Color drains from Victor Carter so fast it feels visible, the way collapse always does once masks stop holding. He stammers that he did not know, and Catherine Whitmore says he did not know because he never bothered to know me. Whispers move across the room, phones appear, and the bride is suddenly no longer the center of the evening. Sophie Carter jumps up and insists I am lying, but Ethan Whitmore has already stepped away from her hand. Helena Carter tries the family matter defense, and Catherine Whitmore replies they made it public on a giant screen. The room exhales all at once, as if 200 people were holding one breath until power chose a side. Victor Carter tries his country club voice and says it was only a silly joke because families tease each other. Catherine Whitmore answers that her family does not put children's medical records on a screen for entertainment. She turns to Ethan Whitmore and says they will be having a private conversation later tonight. Ethan Whitmore nods, staring at Sophie Carter with something worse than anger, recalculation. He says she told him I was unstable and jealous, and now the story she sold him is burning in public. Sophie Carter insists I am jealous, and Ethan Whitmore answers that licensed architects with awards are not jealous of this. Desperate, Victor Carter shifts toward the Oakdale partnership, hoping business can still outrun character for one more minute. Catherine Whitmore cuts him off and says after what she has witnessed, there is no Oakdale partnership anymore. Victor Carter's mouth opens, but nothing emerges, because entitlement rarely rehearses for being denied in public. Helena Carter makes a strangled sound into the tablecloth, grieving image rather than the daughter she helped sacrifice. I stand there without smiling, because revenge is not what fills me now. It is something steadier than that. For the first time in my life, simply standing in the middle of the room is enough to change its axis. I ask the audience whether they would have pressed begin or walked away, because that choice still matters to me. Then Sophie Carter pivots fast, crying on command with hands at her chest and mascara beginning its performance. She sobs that this is her day and says, I have always been jealous, trying to reclaim victimhood with bridal tears. A few guests waver, because tears can tilt a room when people are desperate for a simpler explanation. Sophie Carter turns to Ethan Whitmore and asks whether he is choosing me on their wedding day of all days. Helena Carter wraps an arm around her baby and begs Catherine Whitmore to see what is supposedly happening here. For 1 second, doubt flickers at a few tables, and I feel how quickly old patterns try to rebuild themselves. Then Catherine Whitmore glances at the glowing screen and asks Sophie Carter which exact part was meant as the joke. The doubt evaporates instantly, because precision beats performance when the evidence is still shining behind the liar. Sophie Carter cries that I am ruining her wedding, and I answer calmly that I did not make those slides. Catherine Whitmore is not finished. She turns back to Victor Carter and mentions the Oakdale land consolidation. She reminds him he told her family every parcel was fully controlled, ready, and legally accounted for under his company. Hearing Oakdale, I remember the deed in my pocket and feel the last missing piece lock into place. I pull out the photocopy and say the center parcel still belongs to Elena Carter, and I have the proof right here. Victor Carter's face goes rigid with the private kind of anger I knew at 18 across that kitchen table. Catherine Whitmore asks whether he planned to build on my land without consent and without telling her family. He blurts that I was supposed to sign years ago, and I answer that he tried to force me when I was 18. I explain Margaret Carter gave it to me legally at 16, and that he punished me when I refused to surrender it. Catherine Whitmore looks at the deed, then at Victor Carter, and whatever credibility he had dies there. Around us, the room does its final recalculation, and every whisper now belongs to the Carter family, not to me. Victor Carter tries once more to reach me with his eyes, but I no longer live inside his approval. When he finally looks up, his eyes are red, and I realize I have never seen him exposed like this before. I tell Victor Carter that if he wants me in his life, it begins with respect, not conditions or public performances. I pick up my clutch from table 14 and smooth the navy dress I chose for myself, not for their comfort. Then I say if he cannot offer respect, this is goodbye, and the sentence lands cleaner than any scream ever could. I walk toward the exit, past Victor Carter, past Helena Carter, past Sophie Carter, and none of them stop me. Near coat check, Catherine Whitmore steps forward in her green jacket and reminds me we still have a project to finish. I nod, because professional recognition from her somehow feels gentler than anything my family ever tried to give. Outside in the October night, I sit in my car with the engine off and stare at the shrinking glow of the club. A tap on the window reveals Julian Brooks holding 2 gas station coffees and wearing the same calm as always. He asks whether I am okay, and I answer no. But I am better than I have been in years. Through the windshield, guests leave in clusters, ties loosened, laughter gone, scandal already changing shape on their tongues. My phone buzzes first with Ethan Whitmore, who apologizes and says he and Sophie Carter need to talk. Then Nora Alvarez messages that Margaret Carter watched the live stream from bed and laughed, proud as sunlight. Another message arrives from Catherine Whitmore, saying Victor Carter will not build on my property after tonight. I thank Catherine Whitmore, tell Nora Alvarez to tell Margaret Carter I love her, and leave the rest unread. I do not answer Victor Carter, Elena Carter, or Sophie Carter, because nothing left unsaid belongs in text now. As Julian Brooks drives, Millbrook shrinks in the mirror, and I know the town will do what small towns do best. During the week after the wedding, Elena Carter quietly loses her place on the autumn gala committee she adored. Board members stop returning her calls, and social doors close without ceremony because reputation travels faster than apology. Victor Carter loses 2 smaller business partners within 10 days, enough to show cracks in a man built on image. A longtime contractor sends a polite letter about pursuing other opportunities, and suddenly loyalty has a new address. Ethan Whitmore asks for counseling. Sophie Carter refuses at first, calls it insulting, then watches him move out anyway. The book club Elena Carter hosted for 11 years quietly relocates, and no one bothers to tell her beforehand. In Richmond, Elena Carter returns to Blueprints while Julian Brooks reads me local posts shaming the Carter family by name. He says I did not do this to them, and I answer they did it to themselves. I only stopped covering it. 3 weeks later, Victor Carter calls and offers to buy the land, framing surrender as maturity between adults. I tell him the land is not for sale, and that he destroyed this family over dirt 16 years ago, not me. I remind Victor Carter that Margaret Carter is no longer his bargaining chip because I am listed for direct access now. He hangs up without apology, and for the first time, his silence leaves my hands steady instead of shaking. 2 weeks later, Sophie Carter calls sounding flat and stripped of performance, confessing she never learned who to be without favor. I tell Sophie Carter to start with therapy and truth, because without me as her target, she finally has to face herself. The following Saturday, Elena Carter walks into Shenandoah Hills with no time limit, no escort, and no permission requested. Nora Alvarez meets me at the desk smiling, saying Margaret Carter has replayed the wedding clip 5 times already. In the warm sunroom, Margaret Carter reaches for my hand and says I stood up in a room built to erase me. I tell Margaret Carter she taught me how, and then I finally share the whole life they never bothered to know. I tell her about the GED, diner shifts, college, my first tiny library, the awards, and the drafting table by my window. Outside, an old oak spreads over the lawn, and I think of the tree on my land that still belongs to me. 3 months later, Elena Carter sits in Richmond beneath the approved design for the restored textile mill project. Margaret Carter's surgery succeeds. Sophie Carter starts therapy, and Ethan Whitmore returns only with counseling and honesty. Elena Carter sends a short apology, Victor Carter stays silent, and Julian Brooks starts a new schoolhouse project with me. I learn that being alone is not the same as being lonely once I stop begging for a seat at table 14. On my dresser lies the Millbrook Council invitation with Elena Carter printed clearly, finally under my own real name. I drive back toward the textile mill, not the old house, because I am rebuilding bricks and a life at the same time. My advice is simple. Set one boundary, stop asking cruel people for permission, and build a life they can no longer define.